Hello there once again. Welcome to the Film Buffet podcast. I'm your local film buff Tom, and with me this week once again, like last week, is Mr. Robb Gallo. How you doing tonight?
Thank you for having me, Tom, on the show.
Oh, of course, of course. Well, seems like Beyond is busy again, and he's got a lot of other projects he works on, and I had anticipated and hopefully was going to have him on with me this week, but you know, he just wasn't able to make it, so I figured we'll just go ahead. The first big news that came out was this: Sony decided to turn around and fire back at Dan Aykroyd after what we talked about last week. If you recall, obviously we talked about, for you listeners, we talked about how Dan come out on we believe it was an Australian talk show, and I think you said it was, and I agreed.
It sounded Australian, yeah.
It looked like, yeah, in the way he called out Paul Feig basically on costing the movie, their Ghostbusters reboot, too much money by not listening to the original filmmakers and their opinions, and the reshoots cost a bunch of money and so on and so forth, and pretty much said that Paul Feig wasn't going to come back, there was not going to be a sequel, and we'd probably never see those characters again. And then he doubled down on Facebook the next day. Well, then Sony shot back, of course, right after we recorded the show. They couldn't have done it, just before, but so bringing it up again, Sony decided to come back and say Sony has a strong relationship with Paul Feig, and we have incredible respect for his work. The cost of the reshoots were $3 to $4 million, not $30 to $40 million, and they also claim that the reshoots were not the reason for no sequel or the movie's bloated budget. So basically, I'm going to give you the mic first to say your feelings on this situation here.
2 words: damage control. This is just damage control. They have to go to bat with their guy Paul Feig. Paul Feig is probably going to have something else to do with Sony in the very near future, if not as a director, as a producer, or as a writer or something. So they have to pretty much stand up for their guy.
And that's sad because, I mean, the problem you have here now that I've noticed, especially in the Ghostbuster community, is you have now lost at least half of your pro reboot fans as well, because despite the fact that they were on board with this reboot, part of the reason they used for their reasoning to be on board was, the original cast is so on board and Dan Aykroyd loves it and says it's even better than the original and funnier than the original. Well, now we're starting to see, like we said last week, maybe that NDA is up, or maybe he just don't give a shit because he knows, Sony, we're caught with their dick in the dirt on this one, and basically says, what are we going to do now? It's not going to have anything to do with that, but then there's more to that. But the point I'm trying to get on this here is, like, it looks like, Sony's really, I don't buy a word they said. There's no way the reshoots only cost $3 to $4 million.
Nah.
Maybe for Melissa McCarthy's catering. That's about
it. Oh, yeah. No, well, that's being a little generous even for her, I think, yeah. Sony's had a rough couple of years, though. I mean, so they're going to have to circle the wagons. They're going to protect the homestead, as it were, to use a Old West euphemism. This is their way of saying they have confidence in Paul Feig. They have confidence in their product. Really, I mean, they want. Well, they're not standing. Yeah, they want a united front on this, yeah.
Right, I was going to say, they're not so much standing up for Ghostbusters, but I think it's more so, like you said, in the future they want to have a relationship with Paul Feig, who, outside of Ghostbusters, pretty much has a winning record. To steal a quote from Ghostbusters 2, you kind of backed the wrong horse, Johnny, because Paul Feig now is on the decline as far as how film fans feel about him, and not only that, now that he's gone ahead and said all the things that he said, he's created a bunch of enemies, and for them to turn around and back Feig on this instead of just staying silent or basically backing up Dan Aykroyd's words, they've created another schism between more of the fans, so they've even lost more of their support on the Sony side. So it's like their numbers are dwindling and dwindling, even more so just in the fan base of Ghostbusters now because of this. And Ivan Reitman came out this week and had kind of teased a possibility of crossing over both Ghostbusters in some weird, strange Ghostbusters 3, and I don't see it. I don't really see, especially after what Dan said, but I don't know if you heard about that, but what's your feeling on that? If Ivan Reitman were to basically rework another Ghostbusters 3.5 or whatever you want to call it, or, and bring in not only the original Ghostbusters, but cross it over with the new cast as well.
Well, they're just spitballing at this point. They're just throwing out ideas. Oh yeah, we thought about this. We thought about that. It would be great to see this, but I don't think there's really any serious commitment to do a Ghostbusters 3.5 or 3.1 or whatever it is. We're probably going to see something to do with Ghostbusters in the near future.
Oh yeah. Well, we know they're supposed to be working on an animated film, but go ahead.
Yeah, the animated film. We're probably going to see. I'm not sure if we're going to see this cast ever again. The Melissa McCarthy, Kate McKinnon, Kristen Wiig, and Leslie Jones cast. I'm not. We're probably not going to see those characters. We probably will see female characters.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, there has been several Ghostbuster female characters to this point, anyway, outside of the films.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I have a feeling though, and I've talked about this with Andre on Midnight's Edge. Ivan Reitman has pretty much, I think he's just sitting back, and he didn't want them to fail, but he just gave them enough rope to hang themselves.
Oh yeah. And you also come to a point where it's like, I think Ivan Reitman's kind of taken the center on this whole thing, where he's just kind of sitting there and going, yep, just let it ride out. I'm not going to say anything. He said what he said to the press this week, and I think they had kind of going with that idea because IDW is the company that does their comics, I think. They crossed them over in the comics. And so they've been kind of doing this thing in the comic books where they've been crossing them over. And that was getting lukewarm response. So maybe they were kind of testing that. But then now with this, I think that the whole idea is probably, just shot to shit. And I have no idea from here on out what kind of working relationship Dan Aykroyd would even have with the studio. I mean, we both know that Ivan Reitman is the one overseeing Ghost Corps, but I mean, I can't imagine Ivan Reitman going forward and doing anything Ghostbuster related without the maker involved. I mean, that's the thing, is they picked a fight with the maker now. So it's like like
I said with Midnight's Edge, that Ivan Reitman, and like you just said right now, Ivan Reitman, he's just sitting back. Okay, all right, let you guys have your fun. Okay, you got that out of your system? Feel good? Okay, now do it my way.
Dan Aykroyd, he loves the Ghostbuster franchise, and I knew he was going to talk it up no matter what when the movie came out. That didn't surprise me. And you could tell the way everybody was acting. We got more than enough information out of the emails to kind of get a really good idea of what went down. And now you have this situation where I just don't know what Sony's game plan here is, other than, like we said, they must have something going on with Paul Feig in the future, or something or they're just hedging their bets that, we'd want to work with him before we'd have to work with Dan Aykroyd again, which sounds really sad, but it's almost true.
I think given the chance, they'll try to Wrath of Khan the Ghostbusters franchise. What I mean by that is, in 1978 or 79, you had Star Trek the Motion Picture that came out. And it did pretty well at the box office, but it wasn't a very good movie. Then in 82, you had The Wrath of Khan, which was a soft reboot. I'm like, okay, you know what? That happened. Let's not speak any more of this.
And I mean, the Star Trek first film, it has its merits and it has its downfalls. Like, it's 6 hours long and and it just Beeger. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, that's the Paul Feig Ghostbusters. The Feeger Ghostbusters. Feeger.
And that would be the sad part for the Star Trek movies. That would have made a shitty episode, let alone the movie. I mean, they already had a couple episodes that were basically the same concept as it was, but it was like, really?
Yeah, the Changeling, for all you Star Trek fans out there, with the Nomad probe. That was pretty much that was the motion picture protracted. So, I mean, yeah.
Right. I mean, but I guess just to put a cap on things, I'm obviously on Team Dan Aykroyd like most people are. I buy everything he said. I buy the $30-40 million because I think that's actually even been proven, or there's proof of it in the emails, or there was something somewhere. I want to say that sounds about right.
Yeah, there's like I said, it's just all damage control now on Sony's part. They have to protect the brand, and they have to protect the studio's brand. I mean, because there's still those rumors that Sony Pictures might be on the block. They might part with Columbia TriStar, and as me being a big Bond fan, the James Bond distribution rights are up for sale. So, and rumor has it that Warner Brothers might walk away with them. I'm not sure. 100% yet. But
Right.
from what I've heard, Warner Brothers is favored to snap those
And
up.
that's by the family members who own the rights, correct? Or the family
Yeah.
member who controls the rights? Because you were talking to me about it in private last week a little bit too, because I'm not a huge Bond fan, but the franchise I know is huge, so it would be a big deal whoever does get their hands on it. I do know that. So, and Warner Brothers obviously could handle it. That there's no doubt about it.
Oh, I have no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. They would do a pretty good job with it too, I think.
But I think also Fox has a big stake in it too still, or do they not?
Fox has a stake. Here's what's weird about the James Bond rights is that Sony has the distribution rights for the motion pictures. Fox has the DVD distribution rights.
Right.
And so I have no idea what's going to happen with those.
And I think Fox only got that because of the whole MGM deal, correct? Because when they bought out MGM's catalog, they also bought out their distribution deal for the Bond films, correct? From UA.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I remember you telling me a lot about it, but I know some people out there might be kind of confused. But yeah, that would definitely be one of the situations. And you also have Spider-Man, where I think we've even discussed in the podcast before, where chances are Marvel's going to pony up and say, here, we'll just take care of that for you. And that'll put a lot of money back into their studio, or at least the company, because that's the thing, and that's something we'll probably get into more later too, is the movie studios dragging down Sony as a whole. I mean, they cut their profits in half last year because of mostly because of the Ghostbusters, whole thing costing them so much money. And that's where I think it cost them a hell of a lot more money than they're even letting on.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say things are dire, but they're not going to be on the street with a tin cup, begging for change. But they could use some good news. And Spider-Man Homecoming will probably be that good news. I mean,
well, a little bit, because I think they split the profits. They get 60, and I think Disney gets 40, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll get more into that later, because I do have more to say about that. But speaking of like box office and all that kind of stuff, if you wanted to move on.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We had the weekend. The box office was kind of a surprise. It was like flip-flopped overseas compared to here, and I had predicted long ago this Universal franchise was not going to fly in the U.S. I just didn't see it. And it doesn't surprise me that it's doing very well overseas. The big surprise, of course, was Wonder Woman only dropping, 45%?
Yeah, 45%.
I think it was 47 or 45%, I think the numbers was. And that's just amazing for them. That's a big win for WB, and we'll get into that probably a little more later, too. But Andre, I heard his review of The Mummy. I've heard a few other reviews. I don't think I've seen but maybe 2 positive to the 20-some negative reviews I've read or heard. I haven't seen the film. I didn't have plans to see the film. I don't know if you saw it at all.
No, that makes 2 of us, actually.
Or probably about 200 million of us.
A lot of people don't like Movie Bob, but he had a good review, which started off by saying, "Can we please stop making these mummy movies, please?"
Well, and it was a dumb place to start the universe, not to interrupt. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and it is a dumb place to start the universe. It just seems like it's just another Tom Cruise vehicle, just to show Tom Cruise running places, dangling off the side of an airplane.
Well, and I seen one report, not to interrupt you, but I seen one report, and I want to get your thought on this anyways. They said that the whole excuse behind this was it was a deconstruction of a Tom Cruise action film. That was what their explanation for the plot, or as far as it being a Tom Cruise vehicle, because that was one big critique of it.
Yeah, I'm deconstruction of whatever even that means. I mean, I've always said the problem I have with Tom Cruise is, when I'm watching one of his movies, I'm not watching whoever the character is. I'm watching Tom Cruise.
Right. Well, and he's better, in my opinion, in his dramatic roles.
Oh, yeah.
In Rain Man, Jerry Maguire, Born on the 4th of July, all those come to mind as his better movies when he's able to actually be a character and not rely on those action chops like you're talking about. And this really harkens back to the 80s and 90s when you had your Schwarzeneggers and your Steven Seagals and your Van Dammes. And those movies were basically meant to play overseas, and that's something I also wanted to get into a little bit here too. But what are your feelings on this Universal as a whole? Because, I mean, the next thing coming up is supposedly Bride of Frankenstein, and the rumor is they're trying to get Angelina Jolie for that. So they're making that before they're even doing Frankenstein. And they already got Javier Bardem playing the Frankenstein monster. They got him signed. They've got Johnny Depp signed to star in The Invisible Man, and they're also working on Van Helsing and The Creature from the Black Lagoon already. But the only one that has an actual date so far is The Bride of Frankenstein, and that's February of 19. So that's a whole, almost 2 years away.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people, including myself, who watch Angelina Jolie read the phone book. I mean, for obvious reasons. But
yeah, she's a very beautiful actress. I mean, it depends on her roles for me as far as whether or not I say she's good in her roles, but I won't never take away that she's a very beautiful actress.
Yeah. And I think they're kind of counting on that star power to carry a movie like this.
And I will say, though, that's just a rumor, just so nobody yells at us down below. That's one of the rumors. I think there's a few others, but the whole thing is I think it's she's got to choose right now because Fox is kind of courting her for a part in the X-Men movie. And of course, if they want her for this dark universe, I'm sure that's going to conflict a little bit. So I'm sure it's going to come down to whatever choice she makes. And then from there, whoever will make their choice. But that's just the rumor for now, just to be clear about that.
Oh, man. It's been a while since I read the Phoenix Saga. I'm trying to picture what part she would play in that. Probably Lilandra, maybe?
I'm not sure. I didn't see that.
The Monsters universe, yeah, kind of looks good on paper. But obviously you're going to be missing Abbott and Costello to sort of bring the whole thing together.
Right. Oh, and I've always said that. I will never, ever take away from the fact that the original monster movies from Universal were the original cinematic universe. And you cannot argue that every even franchise since then has almost kind of had to, borrow from that idea of how they worked that whole thing out back then. Because that wasn't a thing prior to that. There wasn't a ton of these movies where you had 10 sequels and crossovers. And not only did these movies have sequels, but they had all these crossovers. And then they got to the point, like you're saying, where they had the Abbott and Costello movies and everything. It's just, they had this whole thing kind of done, and they did it in, a 30-year span or whatever it was. It's just insane that this lasted as long as it did. And I don't see these films doing that again, though. That's the sad part. I don't know.
It's a good idea. People are just looking for anything to turn into a universe now.
Well, not only that, I think the King Kong Godzilla universe kind of stole their idea up front. It's like, what else were you going to do with this? If you were either going to go two ways with this, you were either going to go the Avengers direction, which it sounds like they're doing, or you were going to go the whole versus direction where, you have your movies and then you pit them up against each other.
Werewolf versus Frankenstein, whatever. Yeah. Frankenstein. How many Frankensteins have we done already?
Well, and that's just it. How many Draculas and Frankensteins have they done? They've had at least 2 or 3 Wolfman type movies in the last few years. I think, if I remember correctly, wasn't that one with Anthony Hopkins and what's his name? Benicio del Toro.
Oh, that guy, yeah.
Yeah, the one
the collector.
Yeah, the Wolfman movie they did from a few years back with Benicio del Toro. I think that was a direct remake of the original Wolfman. So, and they haven't exactly said who the Wolfman's going to be yet, but they were ruming, and this is a really big rumor, guys. The Rock.
Jeez. Like he's having trouble getting work.
Well, if they need to save this franchise, but I don't see The Rock playing the Wolfman necessarily. Benicio del Toro, I get. Jack Nicholson playing a werewolf back, I get that. They have that about them that I get why they cast them in that role. It's just...
I will say, though, I'm not a big horror fan, but one of my favorite movies, my favorite horror movies that I have enjoyed over the years is actually An American Werewolf in London.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorites. And 2 movies that came out at the exact same time that have a very similar tone are not only American Werewolf in London, but The Howling, directed by Joe Dante.
Oh, yeah.
And they share a lot of similarities between them. And that's the other thing is I heard, speaking of American Werewolf in London, there's basically a direct ripoff in the plot of the new Mummy film from that film where one of Tom Cruise's friends gets killed, and he's basically cursed to be followed him, and he's all mangled and stuff, just like...
and the rotting corpse is following him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, really, they lifted that too. And I heard so many reviews, but it seemed like Red Letter Media really hit on a lot of the things that are wrong with this whole concept and what they were doing. And the thing that it shows most glaringly, and we wanted to touch on today, was how these movies are being very geared towards foreign audiences now, not so much the U.S. And all the movie companies they're all guilty of it. Not just Universal, they all are, even Disney. Because I remember back, didn't Iron Man 3 have specific scenes filmed just for the Chinese audience?
Yeah, there were specific scenes just for the Chinese audience.
So like I said,
Iron Man, yeah.
nobody's innocent in this situation, and this has become like we were bringing up before, this is just like in the 80s and 90s when you had your Schwarzenegger films, your Van Damme films, those kind of movies where basically the foreign aspect revolved around the star. Okay, and you have some of that here with Tom Cruise. But the other thing we're getting is just how many other elements of the film are really geared towards other audiences and where they lose the American audience on that. And where does this balance start to become a problem? Because at least with the Iron Man situation, they cut those scenes out here, but they presented them over there. And there's ways you can change a movie to fit another audience better than here without changing the movie to gear it, in that form. But I mean, look at movies like the Transformer movies and all these other big movies that come out every summer and how much they're obviously geared towards other countries than they are here. And how is that losing the American audience in the long run?
Well, one of the things I pointed out is that what's happened by doing this is you've had to make the plots overly simplistic.
Right.
I mean, it's one of my going back, one of my favorite movies, Jaws.
Love it.
Love Jaws. And if you younger people listening to this podcast have never seen Jaws, get off your ass and see it, man.
Definitely my top 5 favorite films.
Yeah, but you take the shark out of it. There is actually a very complex dynamic between all three characters. Right. I mean, you have the old world clashing with the new world, the young generation versus the old generation. I mean, yeah, and so you have a lot of very nuanced plot points in there. And I've said you're not going to see that now with these films being tailored to foreign audiences because they have to get across the language barrier. And I've said in a couple of my videos, Men Drive Car Fast works in any language, which is why the Fast and the Furious movies are so huge. I think it's going to be a long time before it comes down. And for any of you foreign listeners not based in the U.S., and I've talked to people about this on Twitter and on Facebook, and they seem to really resent the idea that the plot lines of a lot of films are being simplified.
Right. Like it's almost their fault, like they're taking, and then they hate that too because they don't want their movies simplified either, is what you're saying?
Well, that and I'm going to sound really xenophobic or jingoistic, but I think there's this feeling of them saying, what do you mean? What are you trying to say? We're as dumb as Americans are? I'm like...
Okay, well, there's that aspect too. Well, and not just to prove a point in what I'm saying is I'm not thinking that it's their fault at all.
No.
It's the studios, and the studios are treating them like idiots, and in return treating us like idiots too. And you brought up a perfect example for a film, Jaws. You got a movie that works on so many levels, and that's the parts they're missing is you can tailor films to different markets in different ways and not ruin the integrity of the film at hand. And take a movie like Jaws to where, okay, you can cut a lot of the dialogue scenes out in other countries and the movie will still play. I mean, even I think Steven Spielberg's even said it himself, how the movie will play even if you don't dub it because just the emotions between the actors, it's very visceral, very emotional. You don't even almost have to hear what the actors are saying a lot of times just to get what's going on. And it doesn't make the plot simple, but what it does is prove that the movie works on more levels than just one. And that's the problem, and I think you're kind of getting to is this dumbing down of the movies so they can reach a broader audience abroad and not have to really change anything in the long run to the film themselves is just basically turning all these films into one-note movies. And you really brought up the fact of, over-explaining. And that's one thing in all the critics are saying about The Mummy is there's so many points in this movie where characters are just explaining stuff over and over and over again. And it's so obvious that they're playing to this crowd where they have to over-explain everything. And it drives you nuts after a while.
Yeah, death by exposition is really what it comes down to. You take a point and you beat it to death. And like I said, and for those who may not know, I am actually a struggling stand-up comedian. And the worst thing you can do is run a joke into the ground. And that's the same thing that they pretty much do in a lot of films these days. They take a premise, and they just run it into the ground, and they beat it to death with over-explaining it. And once you explain it, it loses its impact.
Right, and just like the same could be said for the whole reason of why, action sequences have gotten to the point where it's like, you almost have to slow them down, or they have to put those slow-mo shots in just so you can see a little bit what's going on, because they have so much crap getting thrown at you. It's like they keep upping the ante so much more and more and more, because the last guy did this, so now we got to do this kind of thing, But it's like, okay, you got so many mindless action scenes in all these movies, and it's getting worse. I mean, the Transformers are horrible. I have a hard time watching those films. I mean, maybe it's because I'm old, but I get to a point where I can't tell who's who as far as the robots go. And when they start fighting, they look like Gumby fighting himself.
Yeah. There's that old saying, you never meet your heroes. Back when I was a kid, I thought the Transformers were awesome, but now it's just like, okay, I guess I was into that. And yeah.
Well, and they even managed to make the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles unrelatable in every way. I mean, good God. I mean, don't even get me started on that shit.
Oh, man, yeah. So, but, yeah, and actually, another good example was, like I said, G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, when they tried to make it appeal to a mass audience, you had to change the nationality of certain characters. Scenes were in Paris, and I understand some of that, but at the same time, you're taking something that's I don't want to say a very narrow focus. You should be taking an idea and making it better. Right. Not taking an idea and just spreading it so thin so that it falls apart.
Right. And I mean, when you look at it, right, like, this is The Mummy. I mean, it hasn't even been that long since they did the last sequel with Brendan Fraser. That stuff's still fresh in everybody's mind. I mean, has it even been 10 years since they did that third Mummy film?
I don't think so.
Maybe 10 years, but I want to say it was like 2008 or something like that. I thought it came out, but
and anyway. You had the Scorpion King too.
Oh, God, I mean, 20 of those. I think they're still making those. I
wouldn't be surprised.
At least 7 or 8 of those. I'm not even exaggerating. But because I worked in a video store for a while, and those come out like bi-weekly, and I hated that aspect of that second movie. I liked the first Mummy. I was like, okay, it is what it is. It's a cool popcorn film. And that's what some of these movies are, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with making a movie once in a while that, sometimes you want to go in the cinema and not have to think. But then at the same time, it's like, you still want your movie to engage you. You still want to have something there to pull you into the film, because if it's just nothing but mindless action and talking heads and explaining the plot and no real character, what is there? And that's a perfect example where you keep bringing up like G.I. Joe and all these other movies that are obviously made for foreign markets. And it's really sad, because I hope that they start to fire back at the studios and start to say something like, hey, how hard is it to just make a decent film for everybody?
Yeah.
And if it's good, we will see it. Because that's the kind of vibe I get from them.
Anyway. One of the guys who actually runs the local pub quiz, he's from England, the UK, whatever, take your pick. So, but I actually had said to him back when he was younger, because he's around my age. I asked him how long did he have to used to wait for a movie in the US to come to the UK. He was, it was a couple weeks, and actually, he said part of the appeal was, we get to see a big Hollywood movie, because it was a special thing, and not that he didn't want them to be sort of tailored to his taste, but he kind of expected him not to be, and that was, like I said, that was part of the appeal. You get to see something different,
right,
than what you're used to. You want to see movies made in the UK, you see a movie made in the UK, and it's just like here, when I watch like BBC America, watch Monty Python, or when I watch something like that, I'm watching that to see something different.
Right, and that's a good example too, is Monty Python is another, very cross-national films, and they're very popular here in the US, and it's not because they compromise their humor and make it more American, it's because they just keep it the way it is and it works. And that's really what they got to find, is something that works, and not so much, because you look back at the period that you're probably speaking of, back when he was, younger and stuff. The type of movies that came out that we grew up with, especially, are worlds different than what they have now. We'll never get an era again like we had from 1975 to 1995. We'll never get that again. You could even go back as far as 1970 to include like The Exorcist and Godfather and stuff like that. But still, you'll never get an era like that again. And it's just because of the way movies are made now, and the way they kind of shifted to this.
It's a film as product model, really.
Very, very. A movie made by design, or movie made by committee.
Yeah.
There's no single vision. There's no, through storyline. It's not about the character. It's not about selling the public something that they're going to like. It's just about selling something anymore. And I mean, I guess this really started a lot with Godzilla back in 1998. Big time. It was this, we know we got a shit movie on our hands, but we're going to sell it. And they did. And they were just lucky that the internet wasn't as huge as it is now back then, because that's the wall that they've run into now, is not only do they hear us, but they hear people all over the world. And I think that's where like the Midnight's Edge group is very, very important and stuff like that. And our group too, to a point, because we bring so many people from different cultures together to talk about movies. And the thing you'll notice is they love almost all the same things, and they hate almost all the same things. So it's not like these audiences are any less intelligent in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think that, and you don't think that. I know I can say that. It's the film companies that think that, and they've just gone way off the deep end on this.
Like I said, you have a design by committee process. And it reminds me of the episode of The Simpsons where they're trying to come up with a new character for Itchy and Scratchy. Mm-hmm. And so they were just pitching ideas in a boardroom, and what they came up with. And actually, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a good example. The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a good example, is that they've turned Peter Parker from an everyman into this amalgamation of every tween stereotype imaginable. He's a skater. He's a punk rocker. He's an emo.
He could have been in a Twilight
movie.
He's
an emo kid. He's a nerd. I'm like, and he wasn't a character so much as a collection of character traits. Right. Yeah, and just paste it on to Peter Parker. And I'm like, you don't come up with good memorable characters. You certainly don't come up with anything that people can grab onto by doing that. And that's the thing they have to realize, that, if there's a good character, actually a great example, Captain America is such a good character that people in countries that hate us go see his movies.
There's a good example of where Disney, they catered to the foreign markets in a specific way, instead of doing this mass thing like they did with the Mummy, like Universal did, to where in certain areas, they have, like, in other countries, they have their own versions of Captain America. But what they did is just called him the first Avenger, so they didn't have that America thing in the title. And I think that brought in the audiences first, and then them liking the character and liking what he stood for, they saw past that aspect. And in that respect, they were able to keep the character similar, but it's just a shift in the title. It's just the little things. I don't mind those little things, and I don't think a lot of foreign people do either. But that's just it, and a good example of a movie here's a good example from the trailer so far. I hope the movie's as good as the trailer. I don't know if you were able to see the trailer yet, but they brought out a Black Panther teaser trailer. Now, this is a movie that looks like it's going to appeal to a mass audience, not just nationally, but internationally. And I don't think they're going to have to do too much to it to do that. It looks like a very good film. Marvel knows what they're doing. They're firing on all cylinders. Did you see the trailer? What did you think?
Yes, I did, and I thought the trailer was excellent. It was a great primer for the Black Panther movie. I really wasn't knowing what to expect with a Black Panther trailer, and I really don't know what to expect with a Black Panther film. We kind of have an idea from Civil War, because that was actually the Black Panther origin story.
Yep.
Yeah, which is great now, because we could just jump into the Black Panther film, and. Now, like I said, it's been primed already, and so we could jump in. And I love the idea of that there's this secret kingdom just kind of just tucked away in the middle of Africa, and it's this sort of technotopia that's been undiscovered, and nobody has lived who's seen it. I mean, so that you're not having this thing where, he's T'Challa is the king of a backwards nation, which he isn't in the comics either.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's developed and it's actually Wakanda could the way they're portraying it could be a superpower, really, if you think about it.
Well, and I'll tell you right up front, I liked him in Civil War. He didn't really stand above or beyond it to me. I mean, like you said, I like that they got his origin story out of the way. It worked within the flow of the Civil War story. It helped. Until I saw this trailer, I was just like, whatever, Black Panther's coming. I saw this trailer and I'm like, whoa, I want to see this movie.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, this looks good. It looks like all the things that Wonder Woman had, a little bit of Dark Knight, and, you know, it just, you know, and something new and fresh at the same time. So it looks like it's kind of doing this whole mixture of everything. And the movie looks good. I mean, I'm hoping some of the effects obviously are not done yet, so they look a little bit better when we get the film. But otherwise, it just looked. I like I said, I was never even looking forward to the Black Panther as a character film on his own before, because I never really had an experience with him outside of Civil War. I knew who the character was. I knew a little bit about him, but other than just seeing him here and there in a few like random cartoons and stuff, I think he's in one of the Avenger movie cartoons or something like that.
Yeah.
Other than that, you know, I have very little exposure to the character, so I just didn't really, you know, have any investment in him at all.
Yeah, one of the things I and like I said, forgive me for gushing over Chadwick Boseman's performance in Civil War. He has a very regal presence. I mean, that goes without saying. He's playing a king, but I mean, you really believe this guy could be a king.
Well, I'll tell you, he chewed up pretty much every actor he was on screen with in Civil War, to be honest. I mean, honestly, even RDJ had a hard time kind of holding his own against him, I think. He was good in that. I'll give you that. I mean, he was good, but what he had to work with in the film as the superhero aspect of it was just kind of, you know, we've seen this before kind of thing from what I've seen in that movie. A lot of the stuff we're seeing in the trailer I haven't seen before, so I'm kind of getting excited for it.
Yeah, one of the things they're going to have to change, though, is that in the comics, he was married to Aurora Monroe, Storm from the X-Men for a while. So they're going to have not a big thing that I'm going to complain about given the rights issues, but, you know, just a little bit of history for you people out there. But like I said, you're going to have to make it. So, yeah, for the comic geeks, yeah. But yeah, well, talk about a power couple, though. Jeez.
Right.
You know.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I can see now more of his powers, because, I mean, I kind of got just an idea, like I said, in Civil War, but now I actually get to see him. So I'm really looking forward to that. So unless you really had anything more to say about Black Panther, we could probably move on to our next topic and cover everything.
No, that's actually, I'm good with that.
So, yeah, it's the middle of the year. There's still a lot of big movies set to come out yet. Don't get us wrong. But just to kind of look at the state of the union, so to speak, of film companies in general, I sent you the numbers, and it looks like so far this year, obviously Disney or Buena Vista is at the top. Universal comes in second so far, Fox coming in at third, fourth is Warner Brothers, and I bring this up because it's very ironic that if it wasn't for Wonder Woman, Warner Brothers would probably be trailing behind Lionsgate. And Lionsgate is actually surprisingly making more money than Paramount or Sony this year so far. And that amazed the hell out of me, considering Power Rangers was how big of a flop for them.
Oh, man.
But that just means that John Wick and whatever else they had, you know, wow. And Sony and Paramount are doing that bad. Wow.
Yeah. Well, Paramount, I can't even think of a Paramount movie in theaters right now. I mean,
what do they have? Transformers coming up this week.
Well, one thing we got to say that hurts Paramount is that having a pretty much a stagnant Star Trek franchise really is hurting them long term.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing that keeps coming up, and I know we're going to be talking more about that in the future here too, but that's where I wonder if Sony might come into play there, where I don't know. I mean, I have this theory. I don't know if I brought it up in the last podcast, but I know I brought it up to you, where I think CBS is kind of eyeballing Sony for Columbia and TriStar just so they can kind of spawn off and do their own thing with Star Trek, since Paramount has to go through CBS now to do anything Star Trek related. And then that would kind of cut Paramount out of the picture, because it seems like they're kind of been at odds lately, especially with everything going on with the new show and everything.
Yeah, I tend to think that CBS is willing to forego a Star Trek movie giving the license to Paramount, renewing the license, re-upping the license to Paramount for the time being, and just to see how Discovery does. But
Right.
and I think you said it. This is if there is a deal for that and to be in the works where CBS purchases, was it Columbia TriStar or whatever it is?
Right. And I think they'll come with MIB and Ghostbusters, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and that's a couple of years down the road.
Right. Yeah. We've talked about that. I think we did touch on that in the last episode. But to answer your question from before, the only big movie that Paramount's had out this year, so far, this summer anyway, has been Baywatch.
Oh.
And that hasn't even made just over $50 million so far.
Baywatch movie is a good idea, but you have to understand why people watched Baywatch to begin with. It wasn't like this dopey action series. It was just to watch hot girls run around in bathing suits and bikinis, on the beach in slow motion.
Right. Not only that, and I brought up before, it's not like Baywatch has really been in syndication for the last 10 years either.
No.
You can't really flip it on and find it anywhere. So like I think a lot of the crowd they're trying to pull in doesn't even know what the hell Baywatch is.
It might be a name they know, they are familiar with, but they really never seen it. And like, oh my God, what is this, Baywatch? Oh.
Well, and Chip suffered the same fate.
Yeah.
And I think for the same damn reason. And 21 Jump Street was a flash in the pan. When they first announced the 21 Jump Street movie, I'm like, I don't know if that's going to work. For the same reason. And they surprised me. But Chips and Baywatch have suffered basically that fate. And luckily, Baywatch only cost the studio supposedly $69 million. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be doing too well with that. I mean, that's doing okay for them, but not great. So,
but it's all,
I mean, you add in the...
Yeah, I'm sorry, but this brings up a good point, though, is that how many of these nostalgia properties do we really need? I mean, we've had...
Well, and when does this nostalgia wear off, too?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and actually, I brought this up with other people. We don't need a movie for every single, 80s or 90s nostalgia property. Mm-hmm. Like I said, Chips, Baywatch. Another one that famously tanked was Gem and the Holograms.
Yep.
I mean...
Well, and you had this, in the early 90s, they pulled this shit. And the only ones that came out of there that were worth it were the Addams Family and kind of Flintstones. The first one.
Yeah.
And some people like Beverly Hillbillies for various reasons, but that's, whatever. Yeah. But out of all those, and, they did the Brady Bunch, they did all these other throwback shows and remake, update movies. But then the difference then was to now was those properties were only 10, 15 years out of, production and have been in syndication.
Yeah, you're right. You could still flip on the Brady Bunch somewhere. You could
well, not so much now, but then when they did that.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant.
Same thing, even with same thing with Addams Family and so on and so forth like that. And those movies worked better then than what they're trying to do now. See, it's like they're not. If they want to get this demographic now, they should be doing the Rugrats live action movie or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're
not hitting their demographic they really want, and just putting The Rock and Zac Efron in there is not going to be enough.
The Rugrats dug the movie. I don't know.
Whatever. I mean, it's not my generation anymore. I mean, I can't. There's stuff my kid will say he wants to see I've never even heard of now. I mean, it's like, okay, but he don't really watch very many movies, so I know if he wants to see something, usually there's something special about it, and he hasn't brought up in a movie in a while. The last time he talked about anything was the Diary of the Wimpy Kid movies, and he kind of was into Transformers for a while, but since then he's kind of died out other than Fast and Furious. Now it's all about Fast and Furious, so yeah.
I know that Gravity Falls is big with the kids these days. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets a movie treatment at some point. And that's sort of like a Goosebumps kind of series, so you could probably see.
Well, see, there they did one, and that was a hit.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, Goosebumps was a big hit, and I'm not into. I may not see them just so I don't have to review them and give them a shitty review because why? They're not made for me.
Exactly.
I can't give them an honest opinion. It's not up to me. I could ask somebody else, like somebody's kid, what they think of it and get a better, idea. The same thing comes with the latest one, the Captain Underpants. I've never heard of the character really outside up until it came out. But, if I ask anybody about it, it's like, well, what did you think about it? The kids that see it. And it did well, but it didn't do as well as they were hoping.
Yeah. Honestly, that looks weird enough. I might have to go see Captain Underpants. That looks weird. That looks.
I wonder if it'll have a life on video and then maybe spawn like a TV show or something like that, because I think that's kind of what the numbers are showing. But not only that, it got so overshadowed by Wonder Woman.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, those kind of movies usually do better on home video because then you buy it and then the kids just watch the hell out of it.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and like we brought up in the very first episode of the podcast, it's like it gets expensive to take a couple kids to the theater nowadays, let alone a date. So it's like, yeah, I can see why most people wait until they do come out on video and why kids' movies. All right, so yeah, the status of Hollywood is just kind of that. It's looks like Disney's probably going to be the big winner no matter what happens between now and the end of the year because of Spider-Man and Star Wars coming out after that. And Warner Brothers has a chance to pull up in the ranks with Justice League, but really, is there any other movies that you can think of through the rest of the year that might pull any of these studios ahead of where they're at already in the ranks of status where they're at right now in their ranks on the list?
No, not really. We all know what the big movies are going to be. From here on out, I mean, Thor Ragnarok is probably going to do gangbusters.
And that too,
yeah.
I forgot about. Yeah, I forgot to even mention that one. Thanks.
Yeah, and Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi is gonna, for want of a better expression, rock the world. I mean,
yeah, not to go off on a tangent on this one, but I have this weird feeling, and sadly, mostly because of the passing of Carrie Fisher, this one might even surpass The Force Awakens.
Oh, yeah.
See, everybody thought, okay, it's going to be a while before another movie does what Force Awakens did, but then, unfortunately, with that happening, and just the secrecy they've had to this point, because they're really keeping this one very, very undercover. Outside of the teaser trailer, we haven't seen a whole lot, so it could. I think it might even be the biggest movie of all time for a while.
Yeah. It's going to be like a Heath Ledger effect to that.
Unfortunately, yeah, and the same thing I brought up too before in the group was Paul Walker.
Oh yeah.
Look at what that did for the Fast and Furious was doing well, but that one that he was, his last one did very, very well, and now this one did very well too. So, it just, that unfortunately that effect has that effect on these films, for lack of a better term. But anyway, speaking of that effect, there was some sad news we saved for the end of the show because this has been a big one for the comic community.
Just for the pop culture community in general.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Go ahead and your thoughts first, since you were around just a little bit before me, a few minutes anyway.
Sadly, we have lost a legend in the world of pop culture. Mr. Adam West has left us. Adam West, for you younger fans, you know him as the mayor of Quahog on Family Guy. But I will always remember him as Batman from the 60s television show that I grew up watching in reruns. Adam West was always one of those guys that you really couldn't say a bad word about, and you were always glad to see somewhere. Hey, cool, it's Adam West. Wherever he cropped up, you were like,
right.
Yeah.
And that voice.
Oh, the unmistakable voice. That nice, rich, velvety voice that
we even joked about him last week because you brought him up in a joke. Yeah, it wasn't a bad taste or anything like that. It's just he's that big. Not to interrupt, but go ahead.
He's that iconic. And I actually do remember there was an episode of Fantasy Island he was on. I was like, oh cool, Adam West is on. It's definitely sad. It's definitely sad. And I'm in Walmart the other day looking at the box set of the 1960s series Batman. Finally, it's out on Blu-ray. And I was wondering if I should pick it up or not, and I'm probably going to have to pick it up now.
It's worth it.
The Adam West portrayal of Batman fell out of favor for a long time in the comics community, and undeservedly so.
Understandably, but undeservedly, but I'm going to speak on that too a little bit, but go ahead.
Yeah, we had the whole dark and gritty portrayal of Batman, and I had said actually during one of my earlier videos that a lot of DC fans were running away from the Adam West Batman. I'm like, no, you should be embracing this, because it was the first real portrayal of a comic book superhero, other than Superman, on national television that entered into
it had a bigger impact than even the animated series did.
Exactly,
in a lot of ways.
There's a very famous cover of Life magazine with Adam West on it as Batman. And they actually It was a colorful series. It reflected what Batman was at the time, and like I said, Adam West is definitely going to be missed. And this is a pretty significant chunk of my childhood has now left me. So, and
Right.
what are your thoughts on Adam West, Tom?
Well, I mean, just to even just go further than, where you were going with right there. I mean, the thing about the Batman 66 series is it was made for two audiences. It was made for the kids and it was made for the adults. And the jokes and the whole show worked on completely two different levels. And not only did it work, but it did it without ruining the show for the kids and at any point not getting too immature for the adults to where the satire and the humor was still there. And, watching it now, it's a totally different show than when I was a kid. Because I grew up watching it every Sunday morning in an hour block with my dad on Sunday mornings. And they would show, both back-to-back episodes. So I never lived in a world where I had to actually wait till the next day to see the other episode. And, it just, like I was saying, is you wouldn't have so many of the characters we have today in the versions and forms that they are today because of that show. Like I said, it had more impact even than probably the animated series did, simply because, the animated series spawned like, Harley Quinn and stuff like that. But like I said, a lot of the versions and a lot of the characters that we know that are popular from Batman are not because, of anything more than because they were on that show. And everybody watched that show. That show, like I said, was for the entire family and everybody got into it. It was a phenomenon. I mean, Adam West deservedly finally got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I think it was last year or just the year before, one of the two. And even though he's lived a long life and, the thing is he probably had a good at least 20 years in, left in him if the leukemia hadn't taken him from us so soon here. I mean, it's hard to say that because, the guy got 80 some years. That's still not the point. He had so much life in him from what everybody always says. And he just had an almost regal way of him that it just shined through, not just in his roles, but in real life, and a sense of humor that anybody who could be as self-deprecating at the same time but still seem as cool as Adam West did. There's very few people who can pull that off.
Yeah, he was definitely not afraid to laugh at himself.
Not at all, not in the least. And not only that, it's almost like he took glee in a way at being able to poke fun at not only himself but whatever it was he was doing. But like I said, at the same time, he still had that about him that just so many actors don't have anymore. Maybe because he came from the old Hollywood system and he was trained and, he spoke in a certain way in public and he spoke in a certain way when he acted and he carried himself that way out in public despite some of the minor, little behind the scenes controversies when it came to Batman. But it mainly just had to do with, girls and slight drugs. Nothing ever too risque. I mean, the man never had any huge controversies in his life, was never tabloid news. He always just kind of held himself up to this standard, and not only that, he made sure his Batman was held up to that standard. And though the Michael Keaton Batman did rub him the wrong way at the time, I think he became, aware of what that character meant, and he had a little bit of trouble letting it go, but probably just because he just possessed that mantle so well to where, one of his best quotes I seen was, I never had to say I'm Batman. When I walked into the room, people knew I was Batman.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Yeah. Yeah. And actually there was, they brought him back for the animated series. Do you remember that episode with the gray ghost?
Yes. The gray ghost.
Yes.
And then, not only that, but I don't know if you've seen it or not, and this sucks because I was just going through all the Batman media that I have because there's so much of it. He has probably the most in all of DC besides maybe Superman. And I started with the old serials and I just moved into the series, the Batman 66 series. And just to kick it off, I watched the 66 movie and I watched the new Cape Crusaders cartoon that he did the voice for just recently here. And I just him just being able to fit right back into that character is just phenomenal. And if you have a chance, get that Blu-ray set for the series. It's worth it.
There's also I remember he did the voices for, I wouldn't call it a lost Batman series, but CBS in the late 70s brought Batman back in an animated form, and both he and Burt Ward reprised the roles of Batman and Robin.
I think it was 77-ish, and I think then at that same time then he also took the voiceover on Super Friends, if I'm not mistaken, as well. But yeah, you're right. He did do Batman. He reprised Batman in the Batman and Robin series for Filmation, I think it was, who did
Filmation,
it. In that era, and then he may have even been on Super Friends for a while. But regardless, I mean, you knew his voice the moment you heard it. There was no mistaking it. And it just, even beyond the voice, the face, and the way he handled the character, and he took it with the utmost respect. He never disrespected the character. As much fun as they had at the expense of Batman, he never disrespected the character ever.
Always very dignified.
Exactly.
That's
regal. Dignified is a better word than regal. Thank you.
Very dignified. And I was just actually listening to Howard Stern Monday, and Howard was very, very. I don't know if it's what's the proper word, but Howard had some very kind words about Adam West. Said that Adam West always came on the show, always gave his best during an interview, and was more than willing to play along with just about any joke. And he was on the Channel 9 show back in the early 90s, did a very, very well-scripted bit where he taught a superhero class at a community college as himself, Professor Adam West. If you have a chance to track that bit down on YouTube, it's on YouTube, you can see it. But
well, and that's just it. Go ahead.
But Adam West, he was really pop culture's elder statesman. Really, he was very statesman-like in the way he carried the Batman mantle.
Right, yeah. And that's what I was going to say is he gets everybody who's ever seemed to have met him says the same thing. He's dignified, like you said. He's very giving, caring, the nicest guy you've ever met. Never seems to ever, like I said, I've never heard horror stories about him like you do some actors. It's just. He never seemed to turn away a fan. That was one thing that everybody always said is he loved his fans. He always made sure his fans felt like that he knew that they were thankful for him. And this guy went through a time period where, like you said, his version wasn't considered the most popular, and he probably didn't have a lot of jobs and stuff for a while. And, there's a lot of fans that were there for him at those periods, I'm sure, in his darkest times. And I'm sure he remembered that.
Yeah, I mean, there were no doubt lean years for Adam West, but I was always so glad to see that he had a recurring role on Family Guy. I mean,
that brought him back into the limelight for sure. And
now he has been, like I said, he has a place firmly cemented in pop culture history in both in the 60s and today, and it's great to see that fans of our generation and younger fans, even if they don't know of him as Batman, they know him from Family Guy.
Right. Well, and that's just it. If it was just the simple fact that he would still be an icon no matter what, we'd still be talking about him right now, no matter what, even if he wasn't on Family Guy. But because of Family Guy, you make a good point. He was a bridge to a brand new generation and other generations that just either didn't know him as Batman or he was a joke to them as Batman. And I think he's gained a lot of respect because of that, and gained a lot of that respect back. And of course, us fans over the years, we always, he was our first Batman. No matter who else took the cowl over, he was just there. He, just like Christopher Reeves will always be my first Superman, he was my first Batman. I mean, it just
yeah,
it's tough. It's a real we've had a lot of shitty losses over the last couple of years here, and this is one that just kind of hit me pretty hard, and I can tell it probably did you too. So
yeah, I don't think it's sunk in yet. And for me, I don't think it's sunk in.
Well, it's probably because he is just kind of eternal.
Yeah,
he will be.
I mean, he's always going to be with us. His work is always going to be with us, and it's always going to be revered and loved by many people, both fans young and old.
And I hope he did get to finish his work because they were planning on doing a sequel to the Return of the Cape Crusader.
Yeah.
And I hope that they got that done because that would be a really great send-off for him.
Yeah, supposedly he had finished recording his dialogue, and William Shatner was supposedly going to play Two-Face.
Yep, and it's supposed to be based on the original script they never used for the pilot, and I think they did a comic book of it, but yeah. So I can't wait to see. I've been excited to see that anyway, and then like I said, after I heard this, I'm like, well, hopefully if they get that done, that can be at least a great tribute to him,
there's also
say goodbye.
There's also a nice tribute to him in Lego Batman 3. Which actually I saw this weekend. I was like, oh, that is just so fitting for him with all the with the window cameos by Kevin Smith and various other Warner Brothers. Thank you, Motorcycle, for driving by.
I heard that.
Well, see, there he goes. Batman's on his way to the scene of a crime right there. The Bat Cycle just went by.
Batgirl's fine, following maybe.
Yeah. Well,
no, it's just...
But one lasting contribution. Didn't Commissioner Gordon come out of the 1966 series? Wasn't that character specifically created for that series?
I think, if not Gordon, I think O'Hara was, maybe, or vice versa. But if not, he at least became part of the Batman mythos, I guess, is for lack of a better way of putting it.
And actually, I think the Grey Ghost is now part of the Batman mythos too.
I think so.
Yeah. So he's, like I said, he's going to leave an indelible mark on pop culture and on comics, comics lore.
Oh, yeah. Right. And being, like you said, with Family Guy now, at least people know who he is beyond just Batman. And I'm sure that tickled him more than anything to have, because he just seemed to love fans and having fans, and I'm sure having a whole new generation of fans probably just like made the last few years of his life that much more enjoyable, and he deserved it at least.
Yeah, he was a fixture on the convention circuit too. Well,
right.
And I'm just very disappointed I never got a chance to.
Me neither. And now he is one of those that I always did want to at least meet for once, and there's, the same thing with like, bands you want to hear before you lose them, and it's just been a really crappy year for, deaths all around, because we just lost another member of the Batman family earlier in this year, wasn't it? She played Batgirl, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that was last year, Yvonne Craig.
Yeah, Yvonne Craig last year, so, I mean, not many left.
Yeah, I've often said that Yvonne Craig is my ideal Batgirl. And
you were talking about that. Yeah.
And I hope that when they do cast the Batgirl movie, that they not find someone who is a carbon copy of Yvonne Craig, but someone who has that.
Take her into consideration, at least as a.
Someone who has the same characteristics.
Right.
Yeah, there's sort of a sophistication that Yvonne Craig had that is hard to come by these days.
It's sad when an era ends like that, when, and we've dealt with a lot of them already this year, so it's not like it's new. Maybe that's another reason why it hasn't sunk into use, because, it's just, we're so used to it at this point.
Yeah.
It's like, what's next? Knock on wood, it's like Carrie Fisher and then this and a few other ones. It's like, man,
you hate, you start thinking, you hate to think, oh no, who's gonna be next? Ringo Starr, I mean, who?
Yeah, don't be saying nobody's name.
I don't want to put the jinx on anybody. Okay, our condolences to the West family and to all his friends and associates, and like I said, this one is it's gonna take a little while to get over.
Yeah, it's especially for the comic community at large. And like I said, not to just lose Adam West, but we just lost Carrie Fisher, who was another big fixture in the nerd community, or however you want to look at it. So, yeah, it's been a rough year. So give your guys' thoughts down below, especially about Adam, if you have any great memories, favorite movie or favorite shows he was on, anything like that,
One of the actually he did do a few movies actually.
Yeah, early on, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, in this after Batman, he actually did do Lady Chatterley's Lover.
Oh yes, you're right. I forgot all about that.
Yes. Howard Stern would bring that up all the time, and he would say that was one of his favorite movies. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all knowing Howard. Yeah.
But no, and I also remember I just watched just last year again. I managed to find it it was the Return to the Batcave, I believe it's called, where Adam West and Burt Ward are in it, but they keep flashing back to the story of how they became Batman and Robin and just all the goofiness that went on behind the scenes with them. And it was a really tongue-in-cheek but funny kind of TV movie made very much in the vein of the show, and it was just kind of neat to see that again after so many years. I remember watching it when I was a kid, and I just happened to track it down and got to check that out again. So, I mean, that's a harder one to find, but if you guys do get to find that, I believe it's called Return to the Batcave. Or if somebody knows how to get a really good copy of it, let me know, because the one I got was not very good.
Yeah, that's probably something you could pick up on the convention circuit, too, so...
That's kind of the version I had, let's put it that way, basically.
The one that's been dubbed a zillion times and...
Not as bad, but it was cropped, and it was, you could tell it was zoomed in and very distorted.
Yeah. Well, hopefully somebody has it out there. I'm pretty sure. Everybody has something.
See, it may have even been released on. I was kind of disappointed because I thought it was included with the 66 Batman series collection, but I was wrong. I thought it was on there, but
that might
maybe
be
somebody else owns it.
Yeah, that might be a case where somebody else owns the rights to it. Yeah.
Or it was on Fox, maybe even. So that might be one that they own complete rights to or something or other, and they just didn't work out the rights for it. Anyway, point being, really fun movie that he did, and it's also a Batman movie at the same time. So
that's our thoughts on Adam West. Like I said, it's the very sad moment in pop culture.
Yeah, and it's a really crappy way to kind of end the show, but there's things to look forward to. Like we got. Well, I was going to say Transformers, but that's not much.
Spider-Man Homecoming.
That's what I was going to get to. Yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah, it's a Spider-Man, actually, a lot of people have been waiting for. Actually, if everybody has out there has seen it, also check out the trailer for Sony's Spider-Man game on PS4.
Yeah, that just come out. That looks really cool. I mean, I'm kind of debating. I've been looking at updating my video game system to a PS4, and now I got or at least I don't know what I've been kind of leaning more towards PS4, but this might be a good reason to get a PS4.
It's made by the same guys who made Ratchet and Clank from that series from the PS2 days. That was a good series, and hopefully, from what I've seen, it looks like they're really nailing it. So
looks like it's going to be the best Spider-Man game since, what was it, Spider-Man 2 back in the day, where that one was an actual free roam one, and that's the last time they've had a free roam Spider-Man game, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Like I said, and not to get too far off track, but the Spider-Man games have always had a problem where that Spider-Man has such a great way to get around. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think about it. Web slinging is actually a lot cooler than flying if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot more intricate. I mean, it's more acrobatic. It's a lot more fun. And a lot of developers have Spider-Man running everywhere. I'm like, you're taking the coolest part of the character away. Jeez.
Well, and not only that, like I said, I like the free roam aspect of it, and Superman's another one who has a shitty history of games.
Oh yeah.
And the only good game he ever had was Superman Returns.
Yeah, I don't think I played that one, but anyway.
It's more of a free roam game. The only downside is you're very limited on where you can go, because you can fly really fast, but you pretty much can only fly around Metropolis. So it's like you're kind of limited. It feels like in a way. But
you hit the invisible wall, right?
Basically, yeah. You get to a point where it's like Metropolis is an island, and like you said, you hit that invisible wall when you get so far out in the ocean, and it's like, oh, lame. Can't get to Gotham or even Central City. No. But yeah, I mean, that one's a pretty good game. It's just a pretty simplified version of the free roam. You can go and stop random crimes on the street or do the story. Pick there's like 2 or 3 storylines, I think, that go throughout the game that you can pick through. And I'm assuming this is probably very similar.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine it being very similar. That was a big part.
Like GTA,
yeah. Yeah, Spider-Man GTA, yeah.
Can you imagine? Well, that'd be something, though. That's the other thing. It's like, okay, you can do all the heroic stuff, but where do these games actually let you turn around and be somebody bad and, screw it up for Spider-Man to where JJ is right, he's a menace. But
that actually would be great for like a Deadpool game.
Right? No kidding. It's like you can be good or you can be bad.
Or even a Hulk game.
Oh, they do kind of. Well, Hulk, that's kind of all it is destruction. But it's funny. I don't know if you've ever played it, but this goes way back to Sony PlayStation 1. Used to play the Phantom Menace video game. And if you get into Tatooine and you start killing people as, not Obi-Wan, Jesus Christ, as Qui-Gon Jinn, when you finally get to Anakin, he says, I wouldn't help you. You're a murderer.
I remember that game. That was terrible.
But at least it was funny because it's like, oh shit, I should quit like just lightsabering people because I get bored. It's like start killing everything on the screen, and then it's like, ah shit, I can't get any farther in the game now because Anakin won't help me. But yeah, it's like, yeah, kind of a Red Dead Redemption thing too, I guess, in a way. But it just would be kind of neat to have that in a Deadpool game. I guess would probably be the best place to start with, where you could go one way or the other on this. It's like, well, I could save the day, or I could just walk away and let chaos happen. You know?
Oh yeah, that actually. Hey, if anybody's out there, okay, there's a free idea right there.
Right?
Yeah, Deadpool, free roaming Deadpool game. Yeah.
And you gotta spend that extra like $2 or $3 million or whatever it costs for the Jeopardy theme song too. It has to be.
Yeah. Oh man.
And Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. I think
make your choice.
Oh boy. So anyway.
Yeah, I guess that's probably a good place to end it there. It always seems like when we go one way or the other and. But yeah, hopefully next time Beyond isn't so busy and he gets to join me again, and who knows, you might be back again soon, hopefully. So, and of course, everybody can find you, of course, besides on Midnight's Edge, on your Robot Shlomo YouTube page and on Twitter as well at Robot Shlomo as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, you are correct. It's the only Robot Shlomo on YouTube and Twitter. It's very easy to find.
It was funny because I was plugging it on the group talking about you, and I'm like, did I spell that right? And I even checked it. I'm like, I did. So it's not even hard to really misspell. It's like, it is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Robot Shlomo.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Robot Shlomo. I guess I still have no idea who gave me that name, but it works. So.
Hey, if it sticks, and it's unique. So yeah, definitely check out Robb's page, and of course you can always find us on our page here. You can hit that subscribe button down below and hit the little bell to be alerted when we upload more videos, and of course always check out Midnight's Edge, and they have a Facebook group as well. I'll post a link for it down there, and we do as well too, so I'll post that down below too. So thanks again for being on the show, Robb. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Yep, always great to be here.
Thanks again for joining us here on the Film Buffet Podcast.